Imagine this scenario: a sun-scorched field in the Mississippi Delta. The year is 1936. A man named Elijah kneels in the dust, stuffing his final bundle of cotton into a burlap sack. He doesn't own the land. He doesn't even own the tools. But what he's grown by hand through sweat and silence is prized. His cotton is fine, strong, and clean. A buyer from up north is waiting. But Elijah's name won't be on the paperwork. That name will belong to the white broker standing behind him, the one who smiles, shakes hands, and collects the real credit. The buyer won't ask questions. He knows the rules, and so does the company he works for, Levi Strauss Co. This is the part of the Denim story that never gets stitched into the label, the part where hard labor meets whispered transactions, and where black farmers help sustain one of the biggest brands in American history without ever being acknowledged. To understand how this could happen, and why no one spoke out, you have to rewind the story. Go back, further. It's 1853. Levi Strauss has just stepped off a boat in San Francisco. He's a young German-Jewish immigrant arriving with a trunk full of fabric and a sharp eye for business. The gold rush is still roaring. Miners are tearing through trousers as fast as they're panning for ore. Levi sees the opportunity immediately. He starts making durable work pants, first out of tent canvas, later out of indigo-dyed cotton denim. He adds copper rivets to reinforce stress points. The pants become an instant hit. By the end of the decade, his name is stitched into the waistband of working men from California to Colorado. But while Levi is building a future in the West, the brutal foundation of the American economy is still alive and pulsing in the East and Deep South. Back in 1853, over 3.2 million black men, women, and children are still enslaved across the United States. They are legally considered property, bought, sold, whipped, and worked from sunup to sundown. In states like Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina, vast plantations stretch for miles, churning out America's most prized cash crop, cotton. It is estimated that by the 1850s, more than 2/3 of the world's cotton came from the American South, picked almost entirely by enslaved black hands. The average enslaved field worker labored 6 days a week, often 14 to 16 hours a day, with no pay and no freedom. Children as young as 5 were sent into the fields. Pregnant women were not spared. Elderly men were beaten if they couldn't meet quotas. The cotton they picked was sent north and overseas, to textile mills in New England and to companies like the one Levi Strauss was just starting. Denim might have been stitched in San Francisco, but its threads were soaked in sweat from the southern fields. Enslaved people in the 1850s lived under constant threat of violence, of family separation, of forced breeding, of starvation. They were locked in wooden cabins, forbidden to read or write, monitored by overseers and dogs. And yet they endured. They sang. They taught their children to survive in a world built to crush them. They tilled the same land their great-grandchildren would later work as free men and women, still under debt, still under control, still invisible to the companies that profited from their labor. Levi Strauss may never have visited a plantation. He may never have seen a whip or an auction block. But his early business, like so many others, was built within a system that depended on cotton grown through forced black labor, on stolen land, under the full protection of the American legal and economic system. And when slavery ended, the silence didn't. Fast forward to the 1920s through the 1940s. The laws had changed, but the power structure had not. The South had swapped chains for contracts. Black families were now sharecroppers and tenant farmers. They were told they were free, but they still owed landowners for seed, tools, and food. They still lived in housing they didn't own. And at the end of the year, they still walked away empty-handed. But their cotton remained in demand, especially for a booming company like Levi's. As the brand grew, so did its need for high-quality raw materials. The Great Depression forced prices down. World War II brought them back up. And through it all, Southern fields kept producing. But the companies that bought this cotton had to navigate something few will admit today. There were severe consequences for giving public credit to black growers. In many towns, local business customs, bank policies, trade routes, and violent traditions worked in tandem to enforce an unspoken code. Only certain people were allowed to profit, and only certain names were allowed to appear in print. A black man receiving public praise or economic leverage could trigger retaliation, legal or physical. If a northern company acknowledged buying cotton from black farmers, they risked losing access to gins, having their shipments intercepted, or being frozen out of southern commerce altogether. Some companies quietly took the risk, but not Levi's. They had too much to lose. So they used middlemen. The cotton came in under white names. Levi's kept its distance. On the surface, their suppliers looked respectable. Behind closed doors, it was often black farmers doing the work, picking the product, and receiving as little recognition as their enslaved ancestors had a century before. Oral histories from the Delta and Black Belt confirm what the records won't. Elders remember loading wagons with cotton while someone else signed the papers. They remember the quiet understanding that their name would never be on the invoice. They remember being told to be grateful and to stay quiet. Levi's built a brand on strength, legacy, and American pride, but pride has a cost. And their version of the American story left out the people whose hands touched the product first. Today, the company posts statements about equality. They release heritage collections. But in all their polished timelines and corporate tributes, there is still no acknowledgement of the black labor that helped make their rise possible. That absence? It wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. Companies in that era understood that too much truth could cost them everything. And for some, silence was simply safer. Levi's didn't just sell pants. They sold a myth, a story of hard work and honest labor. And behind that story was a deeper one, filled with erased names, buried deals, and fields no one wanted to talk about. Scope News tells the truth. Here are the facts. This story is based on Southern agricultural records, oral accounts from black farming families, corporate supply chain patterns of the early 20th century, and verified economic data from Levi Strauss Co's public growth timeline. No direct admissions exist because companies like Levi's operated in an era where truth on paper could cost everything. And that's why it was buried. Legal disclaimer. This content is provided for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only. Scope News aims to investigate and expose lesser-known historical narratives based on documented patterns, systemic practices, and oral testimonies. This story reflects the economic conditions and uncredited labor structures between the 1850s and 1940s that impacted company growth and racial visibility. While direct contracts or records between Levi Strauss Co. and black sharecroppers are not available, this report is grounded in the era's verified realities. Viewer discretion is advised.